happy with it. So a couple months ago, they said, Tom, I'd like you to speak, and here's your title. And I asked him, like, well, what is that? I mean, why do you want me to talk about that? And said, well, that's what you put into the form several months before. I said, well, I don't know what's back. I don't know what that means. So I think what I meant was this, and this is what's in the program, which is I find it interesting that there are lots of different models for sort of how open software projects are developed. And, I don't have the answers, but I just wonder if it'd be worth to try to think about, can we pick up some things from some of these other projects to make things better? And so obviously a lot has happened already in the past year, and some of this, may already be in place, obviously, like using GitHub and things like that. But let me just talk about what I did. So I was motivated by another package that I use, which is the R software for statistical computing. That is a project now that isn't owned by any one person. There's actually a group called the R Core team. It's about 8 people now. And they're spread around the world, and they have sort of a network of people that work and develop this. I think one of the reasons why I think of R and I'll think fondly of it, because it has these core tools, which I think are highly trusted, is really easy to install things as Python. It's not as easy, I think. And so I just went, well, how do they do this? How do they, what could we possibly learn from this? And one of the things is that they work to make R, the actual core part, smaller and smaller and smaller. So one of the things they did a decade ago was actually not make it bigger, but actually make it smaller and make the individual components as separate packages. So they tried to made it their job easier to actually manage the development by making the core things that actually are the basic things that is the actual sort of software smaller, and then the other things make those separate packages that other people can maybe take over responsibility. Also, what it's known for, I'd say, is this CRAN system. This is a I forget what C stands for. The repository, R archive network. I should know what that stands for. Anyway, but it has this system that if you want to make an R package, it's actually there are a lot of hoops to jump through. But if you jump through it, you then have the standard package that's easy to install. And there are sort of regular builds, and in particular, and it's kind of hated by some people, that basically as versions go up, if your package fails to pass all its tests, it just disappears from CRAN for people using that version. Now, that sounds like a pain for a developer, but as a user, that's amazing. That means whenever you go to use something, it's going to work, it's going to build because it's been sort of tested out the whole zoo. So I thought, what can we learn, and what can we learn from other packages? So a couple of weeks ago, I decided that I would go and do some surveying and survey a bunch of companies. So the old timers of neuroimaging analysis software, SPM, Acme, XL, FreeSurfer, and then other tools which I just happen to know or widely use or have been involved either personally or with other projects. So we have the ANTS, that's the anatomical toolbox from the University of Pennsylvania. NIPREPS, which is kind of an expanded version of fMRI prep. It's a pipeline. It's a containerized preprocessing. Now it's a family of containerized preprocessing tools. The CAT12 toolbox, the GIFT toolbox for ICA. So CAT12 is VBM. Christian Gazer is in the room. Han Sue Gabrielli. NiLearn, which was NiStat, is basically sort of in the family of scikit-learn tools with emphasis was focused on neuroimaging. From WashU, the Connectome Workbench, that's anyone who's doing human connectome project style analyses, that's a key tool. And I got information about the pipelines that some people use. Field Trip, DiPi, and so these are ones down here, these are for diffusion, DiPi, QSI Prep, and DSI Studio. So some of these didn't respond, and Christian, I forgot to email you until today, so I made up the answers. Hopefully they're right. Yeah, I didn't intend to get information specifically about the pipelines, HTTP pipelines today. So I asked them each, like, what is your model for development? Do you have a benevolent dictator for life? That's one model. Do you have a meritocracy? So that's something where you basically have the most active project contributors are most influential, and sometimes there's a formal vote of how decisions are made. And then there's a liberal contribution model, which is basically just sort of saying there's a loose network of people, and they just try to seek and get consensus about what's the best thing. And there's some gray areas between these, but this is kind of one recommended way of sort of describing open leadership and open science projects. Ask them about some things about decision making, conflict resolution. Tell me about the core, the people developing it. Is it core, or was there a wider network of people developing it? And how do you support this? Is it just the core people supporting it, or is it more support from the community? And then how do you validate? How do you know that things are right? We're doing science. How do you know these things are accurate? And how do you sort of take care of reproducibility as systems change, software develops? And lastly, about funding. So I'll just sort of go through what I learned. So about the leadership, some of the smaller projects sort of fall under the dictator for life. It's basically one person who's driving the development, and they decide to steer in the direction. And that makes sense for projects that are really driven by individual. Matt Glaser replied that he regards these as a never dictator for life with a small oligarchy. So there's basically a small group of people there who all kind of make the decisions, and people have to live with it. Vince Calhoun said that they're trying to, they were BDFL, but they're trying to move towards a liberal contribution model. Steve said that they are true meritocracy at NFL. And Peter said that and good distinction is that the core is meritocracy among the developers, but of course we have this vibrant sort of community of extensions, SPM extensions, which really would be considered liberal contribution. Well, actually, I guess each one of those packages could have their own model. And then the ones that are in kind of the liberal contribution model are NIPREPs, Geosci Prep. So these are basically saying like they welcome and incorporate pull requests from all over. Of course, there's some control, but they really welcome all comers. Doug Grieve did point out that they do actually they welcome lots of things, but there's some parts of the code that they could control. They promote some more careful control, and only core contributors really can do that, or it'll be they take a lot of thought before they let someone modify the core recon all. So there's a variety of different models there, but I think this is interesting. These people, some of the newer and most sort of active and growing packages lean towards this liberal contribution model. Development size team. So there are a lot of people. I mean, it's actually, I'm not sure what the 15 is. Those are people in the field or around, but Peter, that's what he guesstimated. The number of non-core, that's basically lifetime. Everyone who's ever developed and contributed to the SPM code was Peter's guess on that. And basically what you can see is that some of the largest sort of tools, the tools with the most developers are ones that are largely at the same institution. So for example, for FreeSurfer, AFNI, and FSL, well, FSL doesn't have so many, but the point is that all these people who work on FreeSurfer are all at MGH or in that community nearby. And same thing with the HTTP pipelines, those are all people that are at WashU. So there's something when you're all at the same institution, it can be easier to coordinate. But that said, there are other packages which are, and the NiLearn and NiPreps are figuring out ways to get lots of input from lots of different people. I'll talk about how they do that and coordinate that. And I just say that there's some tools that really are just at that one institution, where some are more far from. So decision making, most of these people were said they have regular meetings, whether they're weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly. And the decisions, some are just sort of, most of them were just informal. Either you have one person make the decision or they're informal. But the one that stood out was actually having a formal governance was the NIPREP tools. I'll say more about that. So they found this minimally viable governance model that's been put up on GitHub, and so they're trying to follow that. So they forked that and produced a kind of a formal governance that people can see and inspect and see. And what does that mean? But they basically have these standing meetings. So basically twice a month, they welcome people from any background to basically contribute, say what's wrong, just sort of talk at them. And the devs attend, but it's actually focused at users, and it's kind of like an assembly. And then separately, they have bi-weekly technical monitoring. So that's for people who are actively, proposing PRs and the core development team talking about the active projects. And then separately, they have a steering committee that is kind of meeting sort of, has above that and just kind of trying to steer the direction of it. So, and they actually say some aspects of decisions are actually defined. There's some aspects of the software development which they say actually need input from a decision from the steering committee, or actually need a vote at a community or a meeting like the bi-monthly roundup. So that I would admire that they actually had the time to sat down and try to develop that. I think that's key to having a liberal contribution model, where if you're going to welcome all comers, you have to sort of talk about what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. What I haven't noticed, a lot of people have policies on conduct that most of these have that just basically what's acceptable conduct on the forum. About support, some of them really were just the core developers who were offering support. But of course, as we know in SPM, we've really benefited from the community, and I would say the majority of these packages benefit from getting support both from the developers and the community. So I'd say that the support facilities still the same. Most people are using mailing lists, and many of them now are using GitHub. Like I believe SPM is now accepting issues, and which is I raised them actually myself. Actually. And that's great, but that's more for software. That's not like how do I do X? It's more that's more like this doesn't work. Is what they're reserving GitHub for, which makes sense. A few of the projects are using this thing called Neurostars. I don't know if anyone's touched it. So there's a software called Discourse. I kind of think of it as like work-alike to Stack Exchange. It's basically a way to sort of have lots of questions and answers, and you can have tags. Neurostars itself is used by 909 preps and QSI prep. And it looks like this. So basically you have questions, and oh, look, there's even an FSL question up there. And so you can tag questions, and and if you, of course, prefer, you can, I have a membership, I have a login here, and I can tag things. So like, if a question goes up on X, send me an email. So if you are someone who likes being triggered by email, that's something you can have. It just seems like a nice. What's nice about Neurostars is that it can be cross. If you're using lots of different tools, you can actually raise an issue that's I'm using this combined with this. Can you help me on this? And that's good. And then MRI Tricks actually has its own discourse. So it looks the same, but of course it's just about that. So that's another way of actually moving it. So maybe you don't like Neurostars. You can actually just have the same kind of thing. Again, stepping away from the email. Right. Because, yeah. About validity and reproducibility, most people said they use some sort of testing, either unit or regression testing. And also generally about the scientific aspect, most people are saying that they relied on the scientific papers. Basically, you create a new method, you need to have a paper that's been peer reviewed that's going to document that, which is great. But of course, as we all know, methods, there isn't always enough new novel contribution to a method to then actually make worthwhile a new paper, and that's always a challenge. And I don't have an answer for that. Also, a lot of them noted the possibility of getting bit level replicability because, as we know, change the operating system on the same hardware, you're going to get slightly different answers with libraries. So people just noted that it was a challenge. And different groups have different approaches to big changes. So some make sure on the liberal contribution model that you have discussions like, okay, we're going to change this. Is everyone okay with that? Otherwise, if it's more centrally controlled, just flagging up to the users that big changes like may be coming. And then funding, so some of them benefit from institutional funding. Of course, famously, ACNE is funded by the National Institutes of Health. The Connections projects do get some funding from WashU, but of course, like most, actually depend on grants, and we're all in the same boat. And some people said, "Help! Where can I get money? Where can I get grants?" I noticed that the people said they actually benefit from funding workshops. I think FSL probably, and that's something from training. Yeah, watch the balance of it. So, and field trip is, God bless them, they are just doing it somehow. So anyway, I don't have any answers here. I just really wanted to be provocative and just try to suggest, what could we do differently? Are there some things that we could pick up from the other projects? I think it's kind of neat that the idea of the R project really kind of pared it down. So, and it's, it's a possibility, something to consider. Like maybe we should actually call, core SPM nothing more than nifty.io, affine reg, and general linear model or something, for example. I say that because there are SPM extensions that do nothing more than use SPM vol. Now, does that, why are you getting this multi-megabyte file if all you needed was SPM vol and the nifty.io? So wouldn't it be maybe make it easier for our contributions to be used in different ways if there was a more modular sort of structure to SPM? And then, of course, a part of that is that if you then pare it down, and then you could actually make it easier for other extensions to be kind of more formally integrated. Like if you do X, Y, and Z, if you use the batch, if you do this, then you actually are an official SPM. And this is how some ways that we have that, right? You can get yourself into the toolbox dropdown, but you could possibly make more requirements if you want to make it a bit more uniform experience for users. Yeah, I don't know. I still to this day subscribe to the SPM and FSL mailing list because I cannot use just mail for search. It's a complete train wreck. So that's filling up my email quota. And wouldn't it be nice if there was maybe a better solution there? But that was it. That was just my efforts.